Hello to everybody. Welcome to another edition of Libertas. This is Tonino Abana, your host. Tonight we have a distinguished, eminent, and a guest that has been in public service for 57 continuous years. He's been in several branches of government, actually. A distinguished career, an exemplary career in the military. He had a tour in Vietnam. He retired as a 3-star general or the deputy chief of staff. After that, he proceeded to become a congressman, finishing 3 terms in the legislature, representing the district of Batangas. And then he held 3 cabinet positions, or 3 different cabinet positions in the Arroyo government, or the Arroyo administration. I'd like everyone to welcome, and we're very, very fortunate to have former Secretary General Eduardo Ermita. Hello, sir.
Hello, Tonino. Good evening.
I'm so fortunate, or we're so fortunate to have him tonight. Our topic for tonight has to do with preparing for war, or being prepared for war, and still working for peace. And it's because General Ermita has had a very interesting career. He was in the military, but in the military, he developed his advocacy for peace. Sir, I'm so happy to receive your book and to have read your book, which contains your memoirs. Very, very unique. Napaka-unique po nung kanyang experiences po in his 57 years of public service. And I'd like to highlight some of the things that I've read here and then ask you and relate it to the present.
Okay.
So one of the things, sir, that I read in your book is your experience in Vietnam. You served in PhilCag.
Yes.
With then Captain Ramos, who became President Ramos. Sir, during your stint at PhilCag, you mentioned in the book, in your reflections, na you saw the need for civil relations. Doon po nagsimula yung pag-iisip ninyo na it cannot be all war. Sir, can you share that with us, sir? Yung experience yun na yun, ba't ninyo naisip yun?
Well, Tonino, to start with, when the Philippine government was asked to send a contingent to Vietnam during the war there that started in 1964, the Philippine Congress approved the sending of the contingent, but composed of civic action engineering battalions. Of course, we had 1 battalion of security or infantry personnel to secure the engineers when they're doing their job. The mission of the Philippine Civic Action Group to Vietnam, we call this PhilCag 1, was to clear about more than 100 acres of forest in a place like Tai Ninh province, about 12 kilometers from the border of Cambodia, from Saigon, northwest of Saigon, and put up refugee center for those displaced by the fighting between the Viet Cong and the North Vietnamese Army against the Allied forces led by the armed forces of the United States. And so they thought that it was important to take care of the needs of the displaced persons.
So sir, you were in the midst of this war in Vietnam, which we all know was a very vicious war. Pero ang nakita ninyo doon, yung civic action na ginawa ninyo, yun na nakita nyo na nakatulong. And yun na nagbigay ng kaisipan ninyo na dapat mag-focus sa civic action and not primarily on war. Is that?
Well, let's put it this way. Yung aming group kasi hindi combat unit, okay. But as I said, we were prepared for combat.
Yes.
Because we were not sure how the Viet Cong or the Vietnamese Communists and the North Vietnamese would regard the presence of a Philippine contingent together, working side by side with the
But
armed
they were
forces
shelling you regularly. Merong
well,
nabasa ko sa libro nyo.
Our camp was
kayo.
co-located with the American 196 Brigade. And so whenever they send their mortars and rockets into the camp, we are only separated by a very small airstrip. I don't know if I say luckily, some of the rockets and mortar rounds would fall in our camp. So you can never really be sure when we are under attack or not. So the condition was that us being considered also as enemies in the sense that we were side by side with the American forces.
Sir, in your young career as a young officer, as a fresh graduate from the PMA, the conflict at that time was with or against the Hukbalahap or yung HMB, the predecessors of the NPA. Sir, ano ba yung kaibahan ng HUK at saka ng NPA? Ano bang ano? Kasi a lot of people don't understand that part of our history, sir.
You know, Tonino, when we graduated in 1957, the HUK movement was at its height. That's why the graduates from PMA from class 53 onward up to about class 59 were all fielded direct to the field. In our case, class 57 were divided into major services, and the majority of us joined the Philippine Army. Well, the named person that people might know was General De Villa. We were together in Southern Tagalog, and we were the battalion combat teams of the Philippine Army. Now, the opposite forces or the opponent were the Hukbalahaps. It is Hukbong Mapagpalaya ng Bayan, HMB. And for short, it was dubbed as the Hooks. And therefore, we were running after them in the Sierra Madres at the height of the Hook campaign. At the time, I heard the stories that then Captain Ramos, as a matter of fact, was also with the BCT and a very active staff officer of one of the task forces in Southern Tagalog.
So, bakit po yung Hook, why did they transition to peace? And then yung NPA, why are they still fighting the government? Ano ba ang pagkakaiba ng
Well,
dalawa?
actually, what happened to Lina was like this. If you recall, the former President Ramon Magsaysay was well known for his effort at reaching out to the other side. And he reached out to the leadership of the HMB like
Taruk.
Supremo Taruk, Commander L. Basbas, Sumulong, etc.
Opo.
And when this effort somehow succeeded, President Magsaysay was able to bring the leadership of the HMB into the folds. In 1969, the Communist Party was regrouped and reorganized by Joma Sison. They called it the Reestablished Communist Party of the Philippines, whose military arm was the New People's Army, and of course it has a political arm, the National Democratic Front. And from 1969 up to the present, they've been fighting the government. And
is there any ideological similarities or differences between the Hooks and the NPAs? Or
well, you might say that they have the same objective. They would like to be able to topple down the government and transform it into a communist form of government. And as far as ideology is concerned, they have the same objective. But the only difference now is at the time, they were getting support from international communism, from China, Mao Zedong, and also from USSR. But right now, when the established Communist Party of the Philippines came into being, and things have changed, especially with the fall of the Berlin Wall and the changes in the Cold War, the international communist movement had stopped their support for the local communists. So they are actually on their own since then, about 1991.
Okay, sir. Let's fast forward, leave the NPA rebellion topic for later. Then we had this Muslim insurgency, the aspirations of our Muslim brothers to have their own homeland. And you were involved in a mission that resulted in a successful mission that resulted in the surrender of fighters from Basilan. And they were commanded by a certain Gerry Salapudin, or Commander Salapudin. Sumurrender po sa inyo, si Gerry Salapudin. And I read in your book, which was very, very remarkable, that at the age of 32, Mr. Gerry Salapudin surrendered with all his men. You were the one instrumental in bringing him out. And then, after that, he educated himself and had a successful career in public service as a legislator and as a local executive. And I quote from the book, from your book, sir, because this is important. I'd like to relate your transition from being a soldier into a peace advocate. Ang sinabi niyo po, the day you saw Gerry Salapudin raise his hand to take his oath of office as a congressman of his district is the day you will never forget. Because in quotations you said, you beheld the triumph of the cause of peace, an affirmation of your advocacy. Napakaganda nung sinabi niyo, sir. So, can you tell me, sir, can you tell our audience, how did you convince a hardened Moro fighter like Gerry Salapudin to go back into the arms of the law and to support the government?
Well, Tonino, no, as early as 1975, even that was the martial law year, from 1972 up to 1981, President Marcos already had started the rebel returnee program. And the first talks happened in Zamboanga City when the commander of Southcom was Rear Admiral Romulo Espaldon. The first talks with active MNLF commanders in the field happened in Zamboanga City at the Southwestern Colleges, April of 1975. This was followed in June, and then a Philippine panel was organized by President Marcos, headed by then Ambassador Liningning Pangandaman, the ambassador to Saudi Arabia. And we went on our first trip to Saudi Arabia in an effort to reach out to the MNLF. Now, that was the time when the Philippine government became conscious of the need to touch base with the Organization of Islamic Conference Country. At the time, the Organization of Islamic Conference Country was composed of something like 49 Islamic countries. Now, the objective, among the objectives of the OIC, is to look after the plight or the welfare of Muslim minorities in non-Muslim countries, or where they are the minorities, such as in the Philippines, where our Muslim brothers are mostly in southern Philippines.
Excuse me, sir. We'll be going for a break, but before we go for a break, I'd like to ask you a question. And what did you offer Commander Salapudin when you met him in Basilan, and how was it? I understand that you went there alone, only with your photographer. This is Tonino Habana. Very interesting topics being discussed here. Don't go away. This is Libertas. Welcome back to Libertas. This is Tonino Habana with our very, very special guest, former Executive Secretary, Lieutenant General Eduardo Ermita. Before the break, I asked Secretary Ermita to narrate to us how his meeting was with former Commander, former Congressman Salapudin, and what made him go back into the folds of the law.
Well, you know, Tonino, it was a very interesting experience for me. I have to give a little background so that those listening will understand why and the nature of our conversation. Can you imagine, Tonino, I was a military assistant at the Department of Defense in Camp Aguinaldo. And one morning, about 10 o'clock in the morning, I got word from my secretary that there were 3 Muslims from Basilan outside in the hallway wanting to talk to me and reach out to me. So I was surprised. And so when in order to give an answer to my surprise why there are 3 Muslims outside, so I told them to come in. And so directly they told me that they were emissaries of Commander Gerry Salapudin of Basilan. Now, Commander Gerry Salapudin was very well known among the commanders of the MNLF. He was the chairman of the Basilan Revolutionary Committee of the entire forces of the MNLF in Basilan. And so that was November of 1984. And so after hearing them out, I told them, okay, by all means, that let's find out what we can see in the future. So I developed that. And through the weeks, through the months, we were able to prepare the ground for Commander Salapudin to meet with me personally in Basilan. They sent again about a few months later, February of 1985, they sent back the emissary to say Commander Salapudin would like to meet me personally. So I took it as a challenge. So anyway, I planned on my trip with authorization from Secretary Juan Ponce Enrile, who was my boss at Department of National Defense. And so it was that I had the chance to meet with Commander Gerry Salapudin February of 1984 in his jungle lair in Upper Kumalarang River in the municipality of Sumisip. And I had with me only one soldier photographer, the three emissaries, and of course, the brigade commander, General Rudy Tolentino, who was my upper class in PMA, arranged for a civilian jeep for me to be, transported to the place where we will disembark to walk up about 45 people, 1 hour, the place. And so we were met there by Salapudin. Oh, the place was swarming with all MNLF. I had no soldiers with me except the photographer. I was unarmed. Anyway, so we had a chance to talk with Commander Salapudin. It was quite interesting because after about 30, 40 minutes, I had a chance to whisper to him that I wanted to talk to him by himself. And so he acceded to my request. We were in a makeshift mosque. It's a two-story house na medyo hindi naman kalakihan. No? So we went to a corner by the window. That's how I explained to him the details of what the rebel returnee program of the armed forces or of the government was all about. Knowing his background as academically inclined, I knew that among the things that he wanted to do was to allow his people or the people from Basilan to have access to education. And so I explained to them what the program of the government was all about. And one very interesting thing I told him in our talk was, you look, Commander Gerry, I know your background. You're very idealistic, I said. Now, you're fighting the government in an armed conflict. Do you really think you can win against the armed forces of the Philippines? I know your highest caliber weapons, I mean the MNLF as a group, and the entire armed forces, you're up against the entire armed forces. But then there's a solution to this. You want to improve the lot of your people? I said, return to the folds. You'll be given a chance by the government and the President Marcos at the time. You can even be appointed to the regional assembly of the autonomous region that was already created by President Marcos, after which you can participate in actual governance. Then, he repeated this when he spoke during the book launch out of my book last September 28. He related that. He said, I still remember what Colonel Ermita told me, that if you are watching a basketball game and your team is not doing well, all you can do is just curse the players for not playing well because you are only in the bleacher. But if you are a player, you are a participant in the game, then you can influence the outcome of the game. Ganun din sa governance. If you return to the polls peacefully, government will give you the wherewithals for you to be able to finish your studies, finish your college, and at the same time, put up educational institution for your people. Iyon ang nagustuhan ni Commander Salapudin.
So, sir, naging adversary ng AFP yung grupo ng MNLF, and then eventually you became a congressman, naging congressman din. Nagsama pa kayo sa Kongreso.
Yan ang maganda niya, Torino. So, as soon as he returned to the folds, after about a year as member of the Regional Assembly of the Autonomous Region, he ran for governor of Basilan and won and served for 3 terms, 9 years. When he finished his term, he said he would like to run for Congress. And so I reported then, the president was President Ramos, and I said, Sir, Governor Salapudin gave the information that he was interested in continuing with this public service. And so I said, go ahead, let's see how we can help him. And he won handily as representative of the Lone District of Basilan. At that time, I was a congressman already for the first district of Batangas. So we were together. And that's what I said in my book, that you can imagine, I felt some degree of
Pride.
accomplishment and pride in me that here, someone who I brought out of the colds is now together with me in the halls of Congress.
But you were also involved in the processing of the coming back to the fold of the law of other commanders, other Muslim fighters, which is quite remarkable. And now we know that the MNLF, the MILF split with the MNLF, and we're now we have this peace process with the MILF. Let's leave that for a while, sir, and go back to the NPA. Nung pong congressman kayo, one of your advocacies, and which actually happened, was the repeal of the anti-subversion law. And how does this relate to your advocacy sa trying to pursue peace with the CPP-NPA?
Well, Tadino, that is a very good example on how past presidents, especially from President Ramos, or for that matter, even during time President Cory Aquino, to President Ramos, to President Estrada, President Gloria, and now even President Duterte, had been exerting effort to extend the hand of peace to the other side. And in the case of President Ramos, he wanted to be able to give a good start with the peace process. The first thing he did as president was organize the National Unification Commission, which came up with the recommendation on creating the Office of the President for Peace Process, and also the negotiating panel with the MNLF. And because of that, we had several missions in reaching out to Nur Mishwari, but a very, very important thing during time President Ramos was reaching out to the Organization of Islamic Conference, who had good connect with the Chairman Nur Mishwari of the Moro National Liberation Front, who at the time was staying in Tripoli, Libya, under President Gaddafi. And it was during the time of President Ramos that in October of 1992, he sent us on a special mission to convince Mishwari to come home and agree to negotiate personally with the government panel here in the Philippines, and not through the OIC, even if the negotiation was under the auspices of the OIC, because they created a committee, first committee of 4. Now, during time President Ramos, the OIC created the committee of 6, composed of Saudi Arabia, Libya, Somalia, Senegal, Indonesia, and Bangladesh. And the chairman was Indonesia. So you notice that with this effort of President Ramos, we were able to reach out to the main leadership of mainstream Moro National Liberation Front. Now, when I was in Congress, President Ramos asked Congress through Speaker de Venecia that he wanted a major bill to be passed into law in his 100 days as president in 1992. And he wanted the repeal of Republic Act 1700, the anti-subversion law. By, I don't know, by accident of fate, I happened to be a junior congressman, but given my background in the military, I became the senior vice chairman of the Committee on National Defense and Security, and my chairman was Congressman Aping Yap. When that request of President Ramos reached Speaker de Venecia, Congressman Aping Yap was in the Netherlands reaching out to Joma Sison and Halandoni. So I was forced to, call the meeting of the 43 members of the Committee on National Defense and Security, and we were able to fast track, under the leadership of Speaker de Venecia, the passage of that bill that repealed Republic Act 1700.
So when you were in Congress, you were actually still working for the peace by helping pass those laws related to peace-building measures. For example, the creation of ARM, ratifying the peace agreement, and then the repealing of the Anti-Subversion Act. Now, of course, we know that there was peace efforts with the CPP-NPA. There were some agreements signed, several agreements signed leading up to what was supposed to be the final peace agreement with the CPP-NPA. But somewhere along the line, from the time of President Ramos, we had President Estrada, and then Gloria Macapagal-Arroyo and President Aquino.
Arroyo.
President Arroyo.
Duterte. Yeah.
Now President Duterte. It looks like the efforts with the CPP-NPA have not been bearing fruit. And it has reached the stage where our president now, President Duterte, has become frustrated and discouraged. And in fact, he says the people that he is negotiating with, the CPP-NPA, is not really serious or not really sincere. What is your opinion, sir, on on the current situation dyan sa peace? Kasi kabisado ninyo yung pinanggalingan eh. So, we'll be going for a break, sir. So, baka pwede nyo pag-isipan muna, and then bitinin natin muna itong mga nanonood. Don't go away. This is Libertas coming back with our guest who will answer our question. Welcome back to Libertas. This is Tonino Bana with our special guest, General Ermita. Before the break, I asked former Secretary Ermita what his opinion is on the current situation with our peace efforts with the CPP-NPA, where our President has shown frustration in dealing with them.
Well, Tonino, I really, as an observer from outside, with the little experience I had when I was in government, I couldn't blame President Duterte for being exasperated. Sabi, naiinis na sa nangyayari. Can you imagine, I was telling you that previous presidents had done their effort. President Cory Aquino even took the step of releasing Commander Dante and Joe Masison and allowing them to move abroad. President Ramos, already the first act he did was the repeal of 1700. And for that matter, it was during the time of President Ramos that with Secretary Bebot Bello, who is also now the head of the Philippine panel, together with the likes of Congressman Yap and the others, had already crafted an agreement on the CASER, the Comprehensive Agreement on Socio-Economic Reforms, the respect for human rights and humanitarian law, and they were supposed to be among the last agenda items was the disarmament and how to treat the armed groups. But despite all this, and for that matter, that was the antecedent of the JASIG, Joint Agreement on Security and Immediate Guarantee, to allow all sorts of people in support of the National Democratic Front and the CPP and the NPA to come out in the open and participate. All these efforts were continued with President Arroyo. My gosh, President Duterte, when he became president, immediately also opened up the hand of friendship and created the panel to the point of even appointing some people known to be, shall we say, inclined to the left, to the cabinet. So, ginawa ng lahat ng mga presidente to bring them into the fold so that we can have peace, final peace after more than 50 years of fighting. Now, what happened? When the talks started, supposedly there was supposed to be agreements on ceasefire. Primero, unilateral declaration of ceasefire, unilateral by the Philippine government and then by the other side. But hindi naman nila sinunod. Patuloy pa rin ang kanilang depredation sa countryside. And therefore, you cannot blame President Duterte for reacting in this manner. And now, President Duterte is invoking, and I'm glad to hear that he is invoking Republic Act 9372, which is the creation of the Anti-Terrorism Council, and therefore, it has given flesh to the implementation of 9372.
What's the implication of that? By declaring them, basically, the government is declaring them as a terrorist organization,
yeah,
and invoking that law.
Well, I happen to have a copy of the law here.
Opo.
I happen to have this because, in this law, when I was Executive Secretary, when this was passed, signed by President Arroyo, the Executive Secretary is the chairman of the Anti-Terrorism Council. Now, what is Republic Act 9372 all about is an act to secure the state and protect our people from terrorism. Okay? Declaration of policy. It is declared that the state shall protect liberty and property of our people from acts of terrorism, condemn terrorism as inimical and dangerous to national security, and to make terrorism a crime against the Filipino people. So, here it is stated that the state recognizes that the fight against terrorism requires a comprehensive approach, comprising of political, economic, military, and legal means, duly taking into account the root causes of terrorism. And then, what are the crimes that will fall under terrorism? In Section 3, it says here, any person who commits an act punishable under any of the following provisions of the revised penal code are considered as terrorists. Article 122, piracy in general and mutiny in the high seas. Article 134, rebellion and insurrection. Article 134A, coup d'etat, including acts committed by private persons. Then, kidnapping, crimes involving destruction. And it says here that terrorism are acts that are thereby, when you commit the acts under these punishable provisions of the revised penal code, where they are showing and creating a condition of widespread and extraordinary fear and panic among the population in order to coerce the government to give in to an unlawful demand shall be guilty of the crime of terrorism.
Sir, you've been in the peace process for so many decades. Do you feel that the government, the Philippine government, has given the CPP, NPA enough chances to talk peace or to pursue peace with the government?
Oh my gosh, masyado, too much opportunities. Ang sabi nga nung iba dyan, ang hirap naman sa ating mga kaibigan on the other side, binigyan mo na ganito, gusto kayo nila, ang buong kamay mo they want to be the one to dictate the terms, but iba naman yun, siyempre, the government is the government.
Sir,
and our president is a very strong leader, that's why he wants to assert himself.
Sir, kasi the difference between the MILF peace process and the NPA peace process is very glaring. The MILF signed a ceasefire agreement. So, tigil putukan. Although may mga konting violations here and there, pero yung NPA refused to go with the ceasefire. And in fact, that's what made our current President Duterte frustrated because of all the killings that are happening.
Alam mo, Tonino, it seemingly gives credence to the suspicion of the authorities that the people outside, meaning the leader in the Netherlands, do not seem to have full control of the people on the ground. Kaya kahit meron declaration sila doon, hindi naman sinusunod dito. Samantalang sa Moro Islamic Liberation Front, since the leadership is here in the Philippines, they were able to immediately, during the time President Arroyo, come to terms with the government. I recall, one of the members of the Central Committee of the MILF, Attorney Musi Buwat.
Yes, sir.
I was the one who signed the ceasefire agreement with the MILF, to be exact, July 19, 2003. And through Attorney Musi Buwat, he was able to have my paper sent to Haji Murad, and he signed it and sent us back to us. And that's the same agreement that's holding the ceasefire until now with the MILF. So the great difference is the leadership, the MILF is here. Nakakausap natin personal. Pag may mga problema, kaagad, mayroong mga committee on the ground. But ang hirap sa other side, sa ating mga brothers sa CPP, NP, NDF, nandoon sila na hindi naman nila masyadong makomand itong mga on the ground. Kaya nakakapagduda ngayon, meron pa ba siya? May control talaga sila sa mga ito? Can they speak in their behalf? Or what's the score?
Sir, I was listening to the speech of President Duterte yesterday, and one of the things that he said was the poorest parts of the Philippines is actually the agricultural areas. Mm-hmm. And he's actually blaming the insurgency for the no development or the lack of development in these agricultural areas, because he said in these isolated areas, you have another
System of-
invisible government collecting taxes.
Exactly.
So, are you in agreement with that statement, sir?
Definitely, di ba sabi ko, in 1991, with the end of the Cold War, nawala na ang support nila from international communism. So they're existing on their own. Where do you expect them to get the resources to be able to support the movement? And ganyan lang. They call this progressive taxation. During elections, they call this taxation for them to be allowed to campaign.
To campaign.
Oo, so, ganyan lamang, nagiging bandits na lang sila. Kaya ngayon, ang hirap mo niyan, ay yung mga destruction of property, yung mga mayroong local and foreign investors, sinusunog yung mga makinarya nila sa probinsya pag hindi nagbibigay ng appropriate so-called progressive taxation. So that's already banditry, that's already crime punishable under.
How is this going to work now? So the president has unleashed the military. The gloves are off. I'm sure the military is going on offensive. In fact, may namatay na dun sa
Batangas,
sa Batangas sa area ninyo. Nasugbo Tagaytay Road pa, which is a popular road.
Correct.
And they were able to neutralize a whole ano ba eh? 14. A whole contingent. 15. Malaki na yan for the
Laki.
NPA.
Oh, for one encounter, that's too big.
And ubus sila doon sa isang encounter. So we can expect that to happen in other areas. As you go military, di ba parang carrot and stick yan eh. So are they going to go for, do you think they will go for regionalized peace talks, localized peace talks, yung mga gustong
Well, there are different
makipag-usap?
modes. That's where the local executives or GUs will be, shall we say, useful. But while conscious on the policy and pronouncements of the President. So kung meron man silang makakausap sa baba, mga governor, mga mayors, then they must see to it that it would fall within the policy statement of the President. So I don't suppose anybody can stop, the local executives from being can be prevented to reach out to these people. Especially kung mga ito naman, kasi nahihirapan na sila, kasi kababayan din natin sila. Pag nagsabi lang sila ng maayos that we want to return to a peaceful life, okay lang. But hindi yung ginagawa nila sowing fear by killing innocent people, and for that matter, sabagay, it's combat a soldier and policeman against them. Okay lang yun, paano? Pero we better stop this so that we can put a stop to this problem. Alam mo, Tonino, I happened to come across YouTube ang situation sa Colombia.
Opo.
I might inject this. Nakalagay dito, si President Juan Manuel Santos of Colombia in November of 2016 received the Nobel Peace Prize because it was well pronounced that by the end of the year, there will be an agreement between the Colombian government and the FARC, Fuerza Armas de Revolucionario de Colombia. But the award was given in November nung lumabas yung referendum sponsored by the government to ask the people, what do you say, are you agreeable to the agreement between the government and the FARC? Ang lumabas 50.24% were against. So, hindi natuloy yung agreement between the FARC and the Colombian government. Pero, President Manuel Santos already was given the award in October of 2016.
That's an interesting story.
So I can imagine that right now, patuloy pa rin yung kanilang, in order to revive, siguro they will come out with another referendum and
Sir,
get a...
medyo we're in our last minute, and I'd like to give you this chance to give your parting message, words of wisdom to our audience, sir.
Well, since our subject matter for the past 30, 40 minutes had been about the peace process, Tonino, and whatever little experience I had, I can only say that every time we talk about the two groups of Philippine panel and the other side, whether NDF or MILF are concerned, we look at a light on the other side of the tunnel. And we wish that someday we will achieve peace by, on the other side, by being reasonable, because our government is serious. And with the kind of leadership we have under President Duterte, I'm very sure that if the demands are reasonable, then I'm very sure something can come up with our talks with the CPP and PNDF. I happened to be spoken with Secretary Bebot Bello a few days ago, and he says that while the President said terminated on talks, pero as far as Secretary Bello is concerned, if there is any cue that they would like to resume, siguro magagawa ng paraan yan. But not until the time that they will really commit to their own promise that they will stop the killing of innocent civilians.
Thank you so much, sir. Naubusan na tayong oras, but before we end, I'd like to read a portion of your book, the book of Secretary Ermita. Many of those who have fastidiously worked for peace for the past several decades have not seen their labor come into fruition. I too fear that I will not see this day, but it is not with regret. It is knowing that I have helped pave the road leading to it that keeps my heart fulfilled. Amen. This is Tonino Habana. Thank you so much, General Ermita, for joining us. This is Libertas signing off. Good evening.